it is the crop rockin', nickelback poppin', curls for all the girls, the Terminator, Sam Beal. As seen on Impact Wrestling, and you are listening to The Final Count.
Hey everybody, Anthony Corelli here, formerly known as Santino Morella, and you are listening to The Final Count.
Hey, it's Eric Cornish, voice of the Valley from OVW, and you're checking out The Final Count. Citizens, this is Super Z, and you're watching The Final Count.
That's right. It is the Final Count Spotlight. Again, another episode. And this Spotlight, I'm joined by former Ring of Honor, ROH World Champion. I'm talking about the Unbreakable one, Michael Elgin. How are you doing, Michael Elgin?
I'm doing pretty well. How about yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm glad that we could get this going, and I'm excited about having you on.
Well, thank you very much for having me on.
You're very much welcome. Thank you for, again, agreeing to come on. So, getting started here, everyone has that moment that made them want to get into wrestling or made them just hook them into wrestling. What was that exact moment for you that made you want to get into the wrestling business?
Well, man, I don't think it was a choice. Like, I'm the youngest in my family. I'm an only child, but I had lots of cousins who were like brothers to me. And they were all at least 10 years my senior. So as I was born, I'm a December baby. And that Christmas, there's pictures of me opening up LJN wrestling figures. Like pictures of me sitting in the old LJN ring as my cousins are playing with their LJN figures. They gave me all their hand-me-down VHS tapes and magazines and everything. So it was like the only thing I ever envisioned for my life from the start, I mean, when I finally, put my real name on my Facebook and put it out there, I had people from elementary school and high school adding me and being like, man, I watched you on TV. Like, I remember growing up and you were always the wrestling kid. Like, I had friends that have kids now, and they would be like, I always tell my son that I went to school with this guy, and all he ever said was he wanted to be a pro wrestler, and then I saw him on TV. So I don't remember a time in my life where I didn't want to be a pro wrestler. Like, that was pretty much the only thing I ever kind of outwardly told people I wanted to be when I grew up.
Of course. So it was like you knew right from a kid, right when you first.
Yeah, like I still vividly remember being in kindergarten wearing a Roddy Piper T-shirt, and the teacher going around the class asking what everybody wanted to be when they grew up, and I said pro wrestler. So, it literally. I mean, if you go to anybody in my past and you say, "Hey, what did Michael Elgin like growing up?" They're all gonna say wrestling. Like, that's just it.
Right. There you go. Now, who were some of your inspirations or that you enjoyed watching? And then even that once you got into wrestling, once you actually got in the business, who were some that you took, kind of made their craft, like kind of made it yours?
Growing up, I was a huge Hulk Hogan fan, of course. I'm an 86 baby. So when I was brought into this world, everybody was a Hulk Hogan fan. So he was definitely the first kind of appealing wrestler to me. But I remember like soon after that, I started my cousin Chris, his favorite match was Ricky Steamboat against Macho Man at WrestleMania 3. So I watched that pretty young, probably 4 or 5 years old. And I remember sitting there being amazed by that match because it was so much different than the wrestling that I was so used to. Because by then I was watching a lot of Hogan stuff, of course, because he was the top guy. He was the big star. Ultimate Warrior was on the rise. So I kind of like was attracted to the main event guys until I really sat as a young kid looking up to my older cousins and watching Steamboat and Savage and going, this is different than what I watch. Like, this is a lot different. And then that kind of started the appeal of guys like the Rockers and the Hart Foundation and the British Bulldogs. And guys who weren't necessarily the Hulk Hogan size, even though they were all in good shape, but they wrestled more of upbeat, fast-paced wrestling with a little bit more to it. And those were the guys that I really gravitated towards. Like I remember in 95, the British Bulldog and Shawn Michaels were my two favorites at the time. And all my friends were over for the Royal Rumble. And it broke down to Shawn Michaels and Davey Boy. And like, I didn't care who won. So when Davey Boy, it looked like Davey Boy won, I was like, yeah, yeah. And then Shawn Michaels came back in and dumped him and he won and I'm cheering. And all my friends were like, you were just cheering for Davey Boy. I was like, no, come on. Those are my two guys. Like, we know that those are my two guys. To the point where one summer I had long hair and I had braids put in it with white, red, and yellow beads for the British Bulldog. Like, he was really my guy. And then the biggest turning point, I think, in my fandom and what made me want to be the wrestler I ended up being was in 1992, my best friend down the street got a satellite dish. And in Canada at the time, we only got WWF product. So him getting a satellite dish, we ended up watching a WCW pay-per-view, which just happened to be the Great American Bash 1992, which for anybody who watches that show, it was the tag team title tournament. So it had like Dr. Steve Williams and Terry Gordy and Hase and Hashimoto. And it was my first introduction to a lot of these guys. And when they were talking about New Japan Pro Wrestling and for Hashimoto, and then talked about Dr. Death and Terry Gordy stuff in Japan, this was the era of magazines. So we would get the magazines, and at the back, you would see, you know, a 2-page write-up of all these VHS tapes. And if you wanted the catalog, you wrote a letter, they mailed you the catalog, and then you could order VHS tapes. Well, me and my friend who got the satellite dish ordered the pamphlet and then just started ordering every Japanese tape we could find that had Dr. Death or Terry Gordy on it. And that opened up my eyes to Japanese wrestling, which ended up, funny enough, even though it was Hase and Hashimoto from New Japan, and I ended up being in New Japan, All Japan was the first Japanese company I really fell in love with. And to this day, Kenta Kobashi is probably one of the biggest influences in my career.
Wow, that's pretty awesome that you going from Hogan to Japan style type of wrestling and everything. I like that. That's really cool. Who were you trained by?
So this is a weird one. I joined a wrestling school at the age of 14, and I didn't know any better, so I didn't know that it wasn't a great school. And don't get me wrong, there was wrestlers there who had some knowledge and taught us how to bump and, you know, hold proper positions, giving somebody a body slam and everything. But there was a kid in the school, Connor, I don't remember his last name. For quite some time, he wrestled in the Toronto area as Tarantula Gomez. And we were at the school together, and we were the only two in that school at the time that were big indie fans. So I remember it was 2002. I would take the GO train up to his house the night before because he was on the way to the training school. We would watch some indie wrestling tapes. Like at the time, what was big was CZW's Best of the Best tournament and the ECW Super 8, and IWA Mid-South was having a lot of, you know, shows with top talent in it. And we were watching those tapes a lot. Ring of Honor wasn't out yet. It had just started earlier that year, but the tapes weren't out as quick as other ones at the time. So we were really big into the CZW Best of the Best. So we would watch all these indie shows and then go to training early and kind of teach each other how to do things. And then we would stay late and teach each other how to do things. And that kind of was the same at the next school I went to. So long story, I know I'm kind of backtracking, but I'm thinking of all this. I remember writing a letter to Ron Hutcherson's school, but I was like 12, 13 at the time. So of course he's not going to reply and say, hey, you know, come to school when you're 18 or whatever. Right. So I was at WrestleMania 18 in 2002, got the flyer for a 2-week summer camp, ages 14 and up. I was 14. So I was like, hey, I went to the camp, technically had my first match after 2 weeks of training because we trained for the 2-week camp. It was Monday to Friday from like 9 a.m. till 5 p.m. And I would stay late with my buddy because we would talk. At the time, everybody wanted to be Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin or The Rock. And we were like, man, you know, we want to wrestle like the Briscoe brothers wrestled each other at Best of the Best 1. We want to wrestle like, you know, Christopher Daniels and Loki in the Super 8. So we had just a different goal at that school, so we would train with each other. And then he left and went to a school called Squared Circle Wrestling.
Mhm.
And when I turned 16, I ended up joining that school too. And the same thing, the head trainer, owner of the school, we had 2 rings, and 1 ring was basically for the girls. And he would just teach them all the lucha spots because, why wouldn't you want a bunch of girls, I guess, when you're the head trainer and
Right.
doing Hurricane Karanas to you. So we basically were self-taught there. But I do have to say that the biggest influences at that school were Tyson Dukes, Sin Bodhi. Many people know him as Kazarni when he was in WWE, and Joe Legend. Those were the 3 people that really took their time out to when they were in to show us some stuff.
Nice, yes. Sin Bodhi, he's actually a alumni of the show here. So yeah, that's really cool.
I mean, he was crazy. He would call me. I was in high school, because he met me when I was 16. He's like, "Hey, you want to go wrestle this weekend?" I was like, "Nick, I'm in high school." Oops, I think everybody knows his name. If I did, I'm sorry for giving it away. But he's like, "Well, we're leaving at noon, so I go into high school. Hey, can I get homework for my 2 afternoon classes? Because I got to leave at noon to pick up my buddy to drive to Detroit, and we would be gone all weekend, like all the time. So he was really, really good to me, because he saw that I wanted it. I was the first person to say, our classes were, I want to say Tuesdays and Thursdays. And every Tuesday I would come in, who's got shows this weekend? I'm free. Like, where are we going? And he saw that and really knew that I wanted it, because some wrestlers don't do that, and I would always try to fill a car, or we would try to fill a car, because in Canada it was almost like a black hole. Nobody really cared about Canadian talent. So we would just hop in a car and go to the States and try to get booked. And that's really how I picked up a lot of bookings. And when somebody like Kazarni, who was a road warrior, saw that, he gravitated towards me. It was like, "Hey, any weekend that you're not booked, just shoot me a text. Like, I'll get you booked." And he got us booked every weekend. It was my friend Ash, who ended up wrestling with Ashley Six. He had a short stint in Ring of Honor. I want to maybe say 2014. He was in the Top Prospect tournament. But we were road buddies since I started. So 2004 is when I met him and started traveling with Ash. And then soon after, Kazarni had got us in his carload, and we were driving all over the place. And as I said, to his credit, he got us booked and paid. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't great money. We're driving from Toronto to Chicago for $40 or whatever, but we were getting experience. He always got our trans paid for. We got a little money in our pocket and experience. So I bet you from 2004 to 2016, I must have wrestled Ashley Six twice a week, every week, because we were just Nick's boys, and they put us on, and we did all these cool spots that people wanted to see, because we had a good rapport with each other, to the point where I remember when, I can't remember their names. What was the girl from Canada that was really good in TNA for a while? Chantel Taylor?
That name kind of sounds familiar.
I don't remember if that was her name or not. I remember her name being Chantel, but her and this Tiana girl, they went to Shimmer and literally had mine and Ash's match, because we had such good chemistry, and they would be on all these shows with us. You'd be like, "Oh, we got to try that." And I remember them sending us the match to review, and I was like, "Could you have done anything different?" Like, they were doing everything we did, but which was good, because they were getting an opportunity, and they saw how dedicated me and Ash were to creating spots together. Like, there's a lot of spots that people do now that I created in like 2004 in the Squared Circle training class, because we would be in the ring for so long together that we would just start doing stuff. Like, I remember I had somebody in a fireman's carry, and he goes, here comes the crossbody, and I caught him, and that's the first time I did the Samoan fall-away slam. And everybody's like, "What was that?" I was like, "Well, I give him the Samoan drop, and I give the guy in front of me the fall-away." He goes, "How do you do that?" I go, "Ash was just dicking around and said he was going to give me a crossbody, so I caught him and gave him a fall-away slam." Like, there was a lot of positions where we would just not goof off, but think, like, what can we do from this position? And we were pretty innovative for that time. Like I said, a lot of the, that where people go for the tornado DDT and the guy pauses them on their lap and then turns it into like a suplex?
Yes.
That was something I did all the time, and now it's stolen. Like, I remember doing it for years on the indies. And then finally, when I got to Ring of Honor, I was like, Generico, you got to do your dive through the buckles, and I got to catch that tornado DDT and give you a brainbuster on the floor. He's like, I don't know. Let's do it where I run up the barricade. And at first, he didn't want to do it at all. And then we got a big reaction. He's like, oh, this is the best. I was like, thank you for letting me do that. And now, like, it's kind of, it's reassuring that a lot of the things that I created for a style that I was trying to be the front runner in is used a lot by a lot of guys who wrestle that style. I mean, God, they call Bronson Reed, Big Bronson Reed, and he does my buckle bomb, spinning power bomb as a false finish now. Like, you can't tell me that's not influenced by me. And I'm not sitting here saying that I'm bitter or anything. Like, wrestling is free reign. Like, I feel like it's putting a book out there uncopyrighted. If somebody reads it and gets it, they can use it. Like, I'm not offended by it or anything. I think it's a feather in my cap if I never wrestled tomorrow, that you could watch TV and go, oh, Michael Elgin created that. Michael Elgin created that. Michael Elgin created that. And I think that's kind of a cool facet of it.
Most definitely. Like, yeah, like, and I feel like, not to be cliche or anything, but it shows like honor, gives honor to you and everything, and a callback basically. Well, you talked about your first match being, what you said, 2 weeks after that camp.
Like literally 5 days of training.
5 days of training.
Oh, no, sorry, 10 days of training, 5 days each week. But again, it was training from like 9 till 5. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a great match, but it was better than some matches I've seen, and I think that was because I don't feel I ever watched wrestling. I felt like I always studied it, which I know that sounds weird as a young kid watching wrestling, but I always was fascinated with how things were done correctly and how it engaged the crowd correctly. And I always watched it from those eyes. So I remember in training them like, okay, we're going to do body slams. I was like, what do you mean? I just pick this guy up and do it. And I could do it. You just have to like switch your hands because it's a little bit of a finer detail. But I felt like I definitely picked up at least the beginning level of wrestling very, very quickly. But the beauty about wrestling is it's one of those, like, it's like if I'm playing PlayStation 5 right now and I beat my game and I'm so happy that my game's beat, an hour later I'm going to get update on my phone, new levels added, you know, and it's like, shit, I haven't beat the game yet. And that's how I feel pro wrestling is. So I feel that there was always growth every year after, but I adapted to what the basis of pro wrestling is pretty quickly.
Definitely. If you could pick 3 matches that you've had in your wrestling career up to now, what would those 3 matches be?
Davey Richards, 2012, Showdown in the Sun Night 2. Kevin Steen in 2013 in Mississauga for the title. The finish was the package pile driver off the second rope.
Yes.
And then against Sakimoto in 2019 in Big Japan for a plethora of reasons. But I think that's the highlight of my career is that Sakimoto match.
I love that you're able to get out all 3 of those. Like, you knew off the top of your head, because like I found a lot of I ask everyone that question, and pretty much they're all like, that's a hard question, which it is. Don't get me wrong, but I love how you were able to answer that right away.
Well, I think because I was very fortunate that I had a lot of opportunities to wrestle a lot of amazing talent.
Definitely.
And like realistically, if you had said what's your top 10, like I could have rattled them off just as quick, because there's so many people that I've worked with that I ended up having such great chemistry with that sometimes maybe due to the position on the card of the year and what promotion they were in, they weren't as seen as these big matches. But if you go back and watch them now, I'm like, damn, that was really fucking good for what we had available at that time. And then the same token, it's like, now it's like, damn, the match I could have with so-and-so now would be even better. Like, there's just so much to play back when you have a career that I've had, you know. I mean, I started making a living wrestling in 2008, started in 2002. By 2010, I was in Ring of Honor, and then I've only been in big promotions pretty much up until the last couple of years. So I very luckily had matches with almost every star that people watch, whether it be on WWE or AEW now.
Yeah, true. Very true. How did you come up with the name Michael Elgin?
Well, I had a plethora of different names through my first 2 years of wrestling in that little gym that we sold tickets as membership so they could get away the athletic commission in Canada, because you had to be 18 to wrestle, and I was wrestling at 14. So at 16, I hopped in a car to come to Detroit to do a show, and I was only expecting to help out. Wasn't expecting to wrestle because I knew the age limit thing in Ontario. But I was a little bit bigger than most people at 16, and the promoter came up to me, which, funny enough, the promoter was actually Truth Martini. Said, well, since the four of you rode together, let's just do a four-way. Got our names, and as they got to me, I'm like, Michael Elgin, and it just happened to be my middle name and my street name because I didn't really have a name picked out that I wanted to go with.
Wow. Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Now, your finisher, the Elgin Bomb, how did you come up with that, using that as your finisher?
So the first time I saw a buckle bomb, Kobashi did it. So I did the buckle bomb first, which was the lead-in, and that was kind of my ode to Kenta Kobashi. And in a match, I saw Dr. Death do a Dr. Bomb where he spun with it. I thought it was just the coolest thing I ever saw. So I was just paying, my respects to Dr. Death and Kobashi. But since Dr. Death did the Dr. Bomb from the side, and I was like, I like kind of the setup is a little bit better for the regular power bomb, because there's so many more things that you can do to get into that position, but also get out of that position, which I think is crucial when you pick your wrestling move, is you can have different ways to get in and out of that move so you can tell a story in every match you're in.
Definitely. How did your time in IWA Mid-South come to be?
Well, I drove with Ash to Detroit to meet up with Jimmy Jacobs to drive to Minnesota for a triple shot, which this is important part. I was not booked this weekend. I just happened to have that weekend off, and he was like, my boy was like, hey, I got a triple shot in Minnesota. Do you want to come? I said, absolutely. Which was also the end of that relationship, because it was like Canada Day weekend, and I was supposed to go camping with my then girlfriend. And I was like, I'm going to Minnesota this weekend. But yeah, so we went up with Jimmy Jacobs, drove to Minnesota. I wrestled Jimmy one night, and I wrestled BJ Whitmer the next night. And they both were working for IW Mid-South and put in a word for me, and I got booked there. Nice.
Do you have a good relationship with Ian? Or
I always did. I understand the criticism of Ian, even though none of the things that have been said that he's done have done towards me. Like, if we had an agreement on pay, I always got paid. I always got taken care of. He always treated me well. I always have had a great relationship with Ian. I'm still friends with Ian. I still talk to him to this day. He's never done me wrong. And not only has he never done me wrong, I think that people are a little bit harsh. Meaning, without IWA Mid-South, a lot of wrestlers don't get their flowers that they're getting today. Mm-hmm. Like, ultimately, the first time I saw CM Punk, Colt Cabana, Ace Steel, Alex Shelley, Jimmy Jacobs, so many more. Chris Sabin. The first time I saw all these guys was IWA Mid-South.
Yeah.
And I think I think people aren't, no matter how people feel about him, which everybody has different interactions with people, so I can't say that Ian didn't do things that are said of him or what. All I can say is that when it comes to me, he's always dealt with me fairly. He's always paid me. Always made sure that if I was driving from a far distance, I had a place to stay, whether it be at his house or getting a hotel for the boys. He always treated me well. And he gave me a lot of opportunities, and he gave a lot of people a lot of opportunities that they would have never got anywhere else. By the time I wrestled Roderick Strong and Too Cold Scorpio and IWA Mid-South, I had already wrestled AJ Styles, Rhino, Bobby Roode, Chris Sabin, all these guys in Canada, but nobody knew that because it was in Canada. Right? So I got my first opportunities from IWA Mid-South, and I wish that people would at least give the company its due for what they did for indie wrestling, because it's not a secret that Gabe was looking at their shows for guys for Ring of Honor when Ring of Honor first opened up in 2002. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Jacobs and Alex Shelley specifically got their spot on Ring of Honor from the matches they were having at IW Mid-South, which was a best of 5 series. And then they ended up going to Ring of Honor and doing what? A best of 5 series.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they had a lot of influence. And that kind of, I wouldn't say nothing like surprises me. Nothing, I wouldn't say upsets me. Maybe a little bit of disappointed just because there was a lot of good things to come out of IWA Mid-South, and he treated a lot of people very well. And I just wish that they'd at least honor some of that footage. Whether they want to show respect to Ian or not, that's their call. But I think he had a good influence on some wrestling. Now, I'm not a huge deathmatch fan.
Mm-hmm.
So I get, you know, some Jim Cornette when he gripes about the deathmatch stuff. I get it. Like, I'm not a big fan of deathmatch stuff unless it makes sense, meaning I'd rather see a barbed wire board match be the culmination of a feud rather than just have a show where it's barbed wire. But that's just my personal taste, not taking away from the guys who do deathmatch wrestling. Just for me, that's not my genre of wrestling that I enjoy as much as others. So, you know, maybe the over the top deathmatch stuff is maybe he added to that, but some people love it and some people are making great money out of that. So if I had any kind of thing to say, that would be my only gripe. But I mean, if it's making money, is it wrong? No, it's just not my taste, right?
Exactly, very true, and I agree with you on that. You know, they need to give IWA Mid South more credit than they do than people do. You know, I went to a couple IWA shows. I've been fortunate enough to go to a couple IWA shows, and I mean, people think, oh, it's all the whole show is just nothing but death matches. No, the whole shows I've been to were not nothing but all death matches, and so
Right.
I'm like, give it a chance, you know. Ian actually even gave me a chance at one point. I had a friend, I won't mention his name because he's kind of been ousted from the business, but I'm not going to go there. But he actually gave me a chance. I don't ring announce. I've ring announced a couple times.
Right.
One of the times was on an IWA Mid South show. I got to ring announce a couple matches on a show. It wasn't a whole show, just a couple matches.
Right.
Because I wanted to be a part. I wanted to be a part of the business. I wanted to be a part of the shows, and so Ian gave me that chance, and let me actually got to ring announce. She's in AEW. Ruby Soho.
Yeah. She used to do Ian shows all the time.
Yes.
Why can't she's been Ruby Soho for so long? I can't think of her indie name.
Heidi Lovelace.
That's right. Yes. Yeah, I liked. Man, Heidi and Shotzi did a lot of Mid-South stuff when I was there. The last couple runs, and those two, I'm so glad that they have so much success. Two of my favorite people to be around, and not only that, they were so effing good. Like, oh my God, I was blown away. One of the very few intergender matches I ever had was with Heidi Lovelace, actually.
Really?
Yeah. And I thought she was really talented. Again, I don't care for intergender wrestling for me personally, and it has nothing to do with women's wrestling. I think women's wrestlers today are better than they've ever been. Yeah. But to me, some of pro wrestling is the believability aspect, and if I don't see it. You know what I mean? Now, if you're having China wrestle me or China wrestling somebody, I see it, you know? Yeah. But I'm not, I don't know. Part of wrestling to me is believability. And sometimes the intergender matches get a little bit too out of believability. Not saying that it's not a show, because it is. But again, we all have our different likes and loves of pro wrestling. And to me, the escape of pro wrestling is believing it's real, you know? Yeah. And that's just something that's, I think maybe that's why death matches, I like them with a little bit of angle leading up to them, because to me, the realism is like, I hate you so much, I want your blood. You know what I mean? Not like, oh, it's just a Tuesday night, I'm going to see your blood. Like, right. To me, the story makes it, right? I want a little bit of storytelling in my pro wrestling. And that's just what I enjoy more than other things. Not that anything's wrong, because I've seen some fucking badass intergender matches and some badass death matches. Just not my flavor. That's all.
Right. No, exactly. True. And I feel the same way, like, for as far as death matches and hardcore matches in general, or like if you're going to have a cage match, have it have it to mean something. Have
Oh
it
my,
for a blow off of the feud.
that I wish that things were different right now so I could be booking for a top company, because I booked this CIW show that you actually helped out with about the tag titles. And in October of 2023, I came back to the show. Hadn't been there since 2006, which, funny enough, Sin Bodhi got me booked there originally in 2006.
Oh, wow.
And I came back, and immediately the promoter, Phil Monahan, takes me aside. He goes, okay, you had the best response I've ever seen from our crowd. I want to do an angle with you and our champion, and I want it to build up to a steel cage match. I was like, no problem. So I wrote out this entire angle from October 2023 to September of this year. And he liked it so much, he's like, you got to book the show. I was like, Phil, I will book the show as long as you tell everybody here that you were putting the title on me before you gave me the book, so I don't look like a mark. He goes, deal. And by May of 2024, the crowd was coming up to us at the merch table. Like Phil, when he was selling tickets, me, when I'm selling merchandise, you and Malice got to be in a steel cage. It's got to be Elgin and Malice in a steel cage, because all those guys keep cheating. And Phil goes, they're already asking for the cage. I go, I know. And he goes, why do you think that? And I said, the art of good storytelling is not to give the people what they want, is to have them ask you for what you're serving.
Mm-hmm.
So if you book an angle, so the only logical thing is this is next, then people go, I want that. I need this. So a steel cage match is meant to keep people out, right?
Right.
So if you have an angle building and the main heel, which we had a group, and they keep interfering, which means the bad guy world champion keeps the title, then automatically the fans want to see the good guy in a steel cage against the bad guy, because then nobody can get in the cage.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why is this such a foreign thing in pro wrestling? It's like WWE is doing such a good job right now of storytelling, and other companies aren't, and I don't understand why. Because there's some really intelligent people out there that can help them get to where they're going and have a crowd want to. I mean, we've been booking Toledo all year, and I know this is just a small show, and I know it's only month to month, but we have weekly TV, and we almost sold out the building now. We have to look for a bigger building because this year we grew the audience, and all of them are there for the story. I mean, the last show was the happiest I've ever been at a wrestling show out of all the things in my career, because from match 1 to match 8, the crowd responded to every character and every story exactly how I envisioned that I would want them to react. And it was like, I was just sitting there like a kid in a candy store. I was just so happy. It's like, this is pro wrestling. Storytelling can add so much to what we do, not just go out there and have a match, and like kind of reconstructing wrestling, because I'd book young talent and I'd tell them what I want from their match, and they would say, well, what if we do it this way? I go, it's a good thought, but you're in match 1.
Right.
Wait till match 6. And he goes, what do you mean? I go, we're going to get done this angle, and then you're going to go in an angle for the tag team championships. Use that spot when you win the tag titles. And they go, oh, that makes sense. And then they do the spot when they win the tag titles. They go, I've never got a reaction like that. I was like, because you can't put everything in front of everybody. Then it's just, they see everything. You have to save some things for later. And that's with matches. That's with finishes. That's with stories. And it's just so compelling. And wrestling can be so beautiful, but yeah, guys just aren't, they're going for the quick buck.
Mm-hmm.
I would rather have a year of drawing 100 people than 5 years drawing 600 people, rather than a year drawing 600 people and 5 years drawing 100 people.
100%. True. Can you talk about working with Drake Younger at IWA Mid-South?
Man, I love Drake. Social media is social media, and they're going to bitch at him about stuff or whatever, but Drake was always such a positive person to be around. Like, I still love, whether it be IWA or PWG, seeing him when you get to the hotel or hey man, how you doing? Like, he's just, I love that guy. He was always great to me. And I'm very much the person that deals with how you are to me is how I'm going to be with you. And he was always pleasant with me. So I got nothing but good things to say about Drake.
Awesome. Can you talk about your match working with Ricochet at IWA Mid-South for the Ted Petty Invitational in 2008 in the first round?
Yeah, man. Ricochet is one of those guys that I knew that we could do some special things with, and it kind of sucks that we never got that big singles match in places that I wish we had of. But working with him in 2008, man, you could tell what he was going to be. Because, I mean, he was just top notch. What a fun match and what a great talent. And the success he's had, there's no doubt. I mean, all the places I've been able to be on shows with him and see just what he can do and how the crowd gravitates towards him. I was happy that we got to have that match.
Yes. I actually got to see him on AEW, on an AEW show, live Dynamite taping, or Dynamite Live rather, that went to back in September.
Okay.
We got to meet him after the show. He was really cool to meet. But he did I think it was him that did him or Guevara, because it was him versus Sammy Guevara. And one of the two of them jumped off the entrance. And so that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, he just Ricochet is for sure a once in a lifetime talent.
Definitely. How did your time in ROH come to be?
Well, I actually did a camp to get into Ring of Honor. I was in a point in my life where I didn't know, the route to the next step. Being from Canada, it's very difficult to get signed, and I always envisioned my career of more so of a Jericho or a Guerrero or a Malenko. Like, I wasn't going to be that guy that just showed up on the scene and got signed to WWE. I knew I was going to have to put in the reps and the work. And my goal, I had two goals in about late 2002. And one of them was Japan and the other one was Ring of Honor. And to me, they kind of went hand in hand, because as I grew as a fan of Ring of Honor and wanted to perform there, they started having those working relationships with Noah and working relationships with Dragon Gate. And that's where I wanted to be. So I had a couple tryouts, dark matches over the years from about 2007 to 2010. And there was a camp that they announced. And I said, you know what? It's worth a shot, because whether they like me or not, I at least get to learn from some great people. So I went to the camp, did the 2-day camp. And about 2 days after the camp, I got a call from them saying, we want to debut with the House of Truth. And I come to find out that Truth Martini was given the option of using me or Petey Williams for the House of Truth. And he called Jimmy Jacobs and said, who do you think I should use? And Jimmy said, you'll get the initial pop for Petey Williams, but you'll get a guy with Michael Elgin that wants to be a top guy, and he's not going to just rest on where he's at. And not saying that Petey does, because I think Petey's great, but at that time in 2010, he was known for the Canadian Destroyer, and you got what you got with Petey Williams. And even though it was great, it was 2010. And Truth Martini picked me. So I got the call and started with them there.
Awesome. And I love that you're with House of Truth, which I'll get to in a minute. But can you talk about your match with Steve Corino at ROH Best in the World 2011?
I don't even remember that match.
Really?
I remember wrestling Steve, but for whatever reason, I didn't remember having a singles match with him at Ring of Honor.
Mm-hmm. It was at Best in the World 2011.
Dude, you fucking blew my mind right there. I knew that I had the feud with Evil.
Right.
But yeah, no, honest to God, I mean, I know I've wrestled Steve a couple times, but I didn't remember being Ring of Honor. He was always easy to work with. So I'm sure it was the same thing. I'm sure it was fun, but yeah, I don't remember that match at all.
Learned something new.
Yeah, no, I couldn't, because I don't even remember there being a Best in the World in 11. I guess I don't know. Where was it? Was it Hammerstein?
The location, I don't know. I think it was Hammerstein.
I think now that, yeah, you know what? I kind of remember, because I remember me I'm a wrestling fan through and through, so I don't give a shit. Like, you say that I think we're all marks. Everybody that gets into wrestling is just a mark. Like, we are. There's no doubt about it. I'm a mark through and through. And wrestling Steve Corino in Hammerstein Ballroom, that's bringing back memories, because I remember that being the big positive for me. You know, being an ECW fan, wrestling in Hammerstein was kind of cool.
Yes. Oh,
So I do remember it being in Hammerstein now. Yeah, but for some reason I thought it was a tag match.
You mentioned El Generico a little bit ago. Can you talk about working with Generico?
I mean, fuck. I was just in Ring of Honor with a who's who of wrestling, like, really. And another great. I have nothing bad to say about anybody I worked with at Ring of Honor. I really don't. Yeah, you know, Generico's Generico. He was the fucking man. Like, what else can you say? He was so fun to work with.
And look at where he is now. I mean,
yeah, you know, and it's like I said, it was just during my time with Ring of Honor, it was literally a who's who of who is there. I mean, think about it. When I was there, we had Charlie Haas, Shelton Benjamin, Del Rio came through the door. You know what I mean? We just were in that era of where anybody who left WWE who could wrestle the style we wrestled at Ring of Honor came through our doors, you know?
yes.
And then we started the relationship with New Japan while I was there. So we had all those guys. Like, it was just it was a who's who.
And I like that with, you mentioned Jim Cornette earlier. I like that when Jim Cornette, because my neck of the woods, I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, where OVW is. And honestly, I didn't realize that that I had seen you actually in person at the ROH shows when they did the ROH shows at the Davis Arena at OVW.
Yeah.
And so I loved when OVW had that relationship with ROH for a little bit right there, where y'all were kind of being on OVW TV and everything, and so that was really cool too. And I didn't realize till earlier today that you was on some of those shows that that they had here.
Yeah,
so that was really cool. And then you mentioned House of Truth. How did you find out you would be a part of the House of Truth and teaming with Roderick Strong?
Well, so first I was supposed to come in and team with Christian Abel. I don't know if you remember him. Him and Josh Abercrombie were with Truth Martini and Roderick Strong. Mm-hmm. Josh Abercrombie was retiring from wrestling, so they wanted somebody to team with Christian Abel. So they booked me to team with him, and then he ended up pulling off the shows, and my debut was a 6-man tag. It was me, Roddy, and Zach Gowen, maybe, I think. Against the Briscoes and Christopher Daniels. So like I said, Truth had been given the opportunity to pick me or Petey Williams for the final member of House of Truth, and he chose me. And that I just got a call and was told what I was doing right away.
Awesome. You mentioned the Briscoe brothers. Any Jay Briscoe stories you can share?
I think that death hit me the hardest of anybody I've ever met in wrestling. What just a gem of a human being. Him and Mark are just unbelievable people, unbelievable wrestlers. I have so many fond memories of Jay. Just being around him, he was awesome, you know. Whether it be working with him in the ring or just being at the show with him, goofing off, or after the show, you know, having a couple beers, whatever it was, he was just he was a good human being that I miss dearly.
Definitely. That was definitely another just a shocking loss right there. What was it like working with Fit Finley? This was at ROH Best in the World 2012.
You know what? It was fun, but I wish that he is such a great performer that he cared more about the story than the audience. So it was more of there's this big guy that has this style, so I'm going to technical wrestle him. I almost wish I was smaller because I go back and watch like him and Sammy from Evolve, and he's like headbutting Sammy and getting in these like fights with Sammy. But I was a little bit more muscular than Sammy, so like he did the, I'm gonna take down his leg. So like I wish that we could have had more of a fight than like the wrestling match we had. But it's Fit Finley, and being in there with him, I mean, he's one of those guys that I watched because I started liking that Japanese style, and watching him and Regal on WCW back in the day was like, oh, this is the stuff I like. Like, you don't get to see everybody do this. So it was definitely an experience that I enjoyed being able to experience. But I think had maybe I'd been in a different position, I could have said, hey, I think the crowd wants more of a fight than like a wrestling match. I think we should give it to them. But it was still, I'm glad that we got to do it.
Right, and you would have think that with it being Fit Finley that it would have been more of a fight.
Well, see, and mostly you think that, but
Yeah.
Such a good storyteller that he knew my background in Ring of Honor, and because I was the power guy, he wanted to have the story of him trying to take
down.
So I feel like that was more of a pay-per-view / TV match than like a live audience match, because then the commentators could have put over, this is Fit Finley, a world-traveled wrestler, and he's so used to fighting, but the danger he sees in Elgin keeps him going to the ground. So it made sense, but to me, it just wasn't what I think at almost 38 and many years removed, I think I have more of appreciation for the match than I did when it first happened.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's Fit Finley, so getting to share the ring with him was amazing.
Of course. Talk about your feud with Adam Cole.
Another guy that just, what a talent, some of my favorite matches with him, we had really good chemistry. We played off each other well. Being a student of the game, I think we both created some moves for each other. Like, I think him hitting that knee to the back of my head, that was probably the first time he ever did it to the back, was to me, because I had a vision for it. And just a great talent that I had such strong chemistry with, and we always got along together personally, so it made our chemistry in the ring that much better. It was, that feud with him was tremendous.
And also, he's the one that you won the Ring of Honor World Championship from. And so, winning that championship, and what did it mean to you?
It was a huge moment. Selfishly, I wish it had happened a little earlier, because I think I got hot, and then they let me cool off a bit before I actually got the title. I think it should have went from Kevin Steen to me to Adam to Jay Briscoe. Personally, I think that would have been a better story. But who am I to say it? Maybe I'm wrong. I just felt like I was really hot, and people wanted to see me beat Kevin because they thought I was going to beat Davey. But then Kevin was so hot, so it had to be Kevin to beat Davey. But if you go back and watch any time me and Kevin were in something when he was champion, like the crowd wanted that change, like that's why that match in Mississauga in 2013 was one of my favorites, because you could feel that audience wanted to see me beat him for the belt.
Right. Now, after ROH, can you talk about working in Mexico and what that was like, and being a part of CMIL 2017 and 2018 International Grand Prix, which the 2018 tournament you won?
Yeah, funny enough, growing up, we found the Latin Network on Saturday nights at midnight played CMLL.
Yeah.
So me and my friend were a huge fan of Lucha Libre, and the second school I went to taught a lot of Lucha. Right. So I was very excited to go to Mexico. And when I went there, and I'll never forget, they put me in the first match, and the luchadors are calling their stuff, and I was like, okay, no problem. And then they're like, do you know? I was like, no problem, I got it. And because I was in position for everything they wanted to do, and I could dive and do all the things they wanted, the crowd was accustomed to, that's why they ended up putting me up in the 2018 Grand Prix, is because I got so over in the 2017 Grand Prix. And that was one of those moments where I don't care what anybody says about championships or trophies or any of that stuff, companies more often than not do not pick somebody to be their champion or win a huge tournament like that unless the person that they're choosing is talented and has the crowd behind them.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, a very special moment for me in my career. Because like I said, not only was it kind of a reward for my hard work and dedication, but I always saw myself with that Jericho, Malenko, Guerrero type career, and they all went through Mexico. So that was a big deal to me.
Definitely. Now, how did your time in Impact Wrestling come to be?
Well, so Impact tried to sign me in 2016 before I signed my first deal with New Japan.
Mm-hmm.
But I was not interested. At that time, I'll be honest, it was a down period for TNA. Not a lot of people were watching it.
Mm-hmm.
Then they had hit me up again, and I declined. But as my son was getting older, I was gone a lot from his life, so I wanted to be more in tune with his life and be around more, because I was in Japan the majority. I mean, yes, I was going back and forth, but I spent probably, for 4 years, I spent about 9 months out of each year in Japan total. So I was only getting about 3 months spread out through the year with my son. So I decided that I wanted to be home more than him, and I just hit up Scott D'Amore and Don Callis, because Don Callis was doing commentary for New Japan, and after every show, he'd be like, Elgin, when are you coming to TNA? Well, I was Impact at the time because he just started there, and then Scott would always call me because I knew him from Canada. So I finally reached out and said, hey, I got a year left on my deal, but I'm going to ask for my release. Is there still a spot for me? And they said yes, and they asked me how much I made, and I told them, and they said, we can't pay you that. And I said, well, then I can't come there. And then the next day they called me and said, well, we can't put you under contract with that because we got too many people under favored nation. So we'll give you a lump sum to start, and then we'll give you the max guarantee that we're offering people. And that worked fine for me. So that's what made the jump.
There you go. Can you talk about your Impact World Championship match against Brian Cage at the Slammiversary?
I mean, probably the best, one of the top TNA matches since the Unbreakable 3-way, I would say. Me and Brian have unbelievable chemistry. And I can post for things that normal people can't post for him because he's so large. So we just had this ridiculous chemistry ever since we first wrestled each other in PWG. And that was one of my favorite matches. And the funny thing is we had a rematch on one of those like live tapings, like on the TNA Plus app, a rematch like the following year in Detroit. And I might have liked the one in Detroit even better than the Slammiversary. And I loved our Slammiversary match.
Yeah.
Brian, I for the life of me don't understand why he's not in the title picture in AEW, looking the way he looks and being able to wrestle the way he wrestles. My only critique of him, and I only feel comfortable saying this on a podcast because I said it to him, is sometimes I think he should not do the 619s and the moonsaults as often as he does because it can be really special for how big he is. But I think he's great, and that was one of my favorite matches during that, and a match in May of 2019 I had with Rich Swann on TV.
Yes,
Rich Swann, one of my favorite matches of my career, not just my TNA run.
Wow. Yeah. And I agree with you about what you said about Brian, because especially when you're a big guy that can move and be agile like that, that's really something that should be an attraction.
Yeah.
So yeah, I agree with you on that. Who were some of your favorite people to work with in Impact?
Rich Swann and Brian Cage.
Okay.
I like everybody at Impact.
Yeah.
I liked everybody when I was there, but I didn't get to work with everybody. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the times I was working with people that didn't have the experience I did. So sometimes I felt like I was so, how do I put this? I felt like a lot of my run with Impact, I had to put more emphasis on bringing my opponent up rather than expressing myself that I didn't always get to express the best of myself because I was so worried about having the best matches possible. And a lot of the people I was wrestling did not have the experience that I did. So it's not that they were bad to work with. I just would have liked more of an opportunity to wrestle with certain people that I didn't get to work with there, because it would have been a lot less focusing on them and a lot more focusing on me in the final product, because they could handle certain things themselves. And maybe that's a little bit too deep, and I'm not trying to run anybody down, because during my time at Impact, there's not a single wrestler there that I didn't like personally. There's not a single wrestler there that I didn't feel we had, you know, a fun connection with, whether we're just shooting the shit in the locker room or whatever. But, you know, I only got to work with like Trey once, and that was really good too. But even that was 2000, you know, I think 20 during the pandemic. So like 4 years removed, I imagine what we could do now. But even then, he was a little bit inexperienced. But that was probably one of the better matches that I really enjoyed, was me and Trey, just because he was a little bit more advanced. And I mean, I can't forget the best of 5 with Eddie. I thought was some of my best work, and I wish more people were paying attention to the product then, because I was really proud of those 5 matches we had.
Definitely. What is next for Michael Elgin in the future? What do you see next for you?
I believe that, one, I'm going to get funding for CIW, and we're going to make it a little territory. Mm-hmm. So I have a strong feeling that that's going to be my career choice moving forward. And I know that sounds very wishful thinking, but some of the companies and some of the people that I've spoken to are willing to make a big investment in the company, and partly because I'm with the company and they've seen the care and the love I express for all the talent we use and trying to give them all better futures, meaning preparing them for TV opportunities. But outside of that, I don't know what I want, but I think I'd like to be a trainer or on a booking committee for a big company, because I feel like that's where I can really excel right now, is helping the future generation and even helping current people agent their matches. And I know that sounds, again, egotistical, but I know from being a wrestler, sometimes being on the outside looking in, you see things a little bit differently, so you can see how a spot might need a little this or that. And I feel that I'm really good at that because of how much wrestling I take in. You know, I typically do 2 hours of cardio a day, and when I do that, I'm only watching wrestling. And then I have to, you know, every Tuesday night, I have to review the next TV that's going up for CIW, because we have local TV in Toledo. So I'm watching a lot of wrestling, and I always can watch and go, just if this was done this way, we could have got a better reaction. And then we go back, and the next time we're there and do it just that little different, and it works exactly how I envisioned it. So I think that would make me happy. You know, as much as I love wrestling, as much as I love being in front of the people, I've got some bad injuries that have piled up over the years, and it doesn't feel good. And as much as I would love to get that WrestleMania moment, which I still think might happen. I shouldn't say I think it will happen. Yeah. But I think probably I got about another 2 years where I want to wrestle full time, and then I want to look at other opportunities within wrestling.
There you go. And I definitely think those goals will come to fruition for you. And I definitely and I'm happy to hear about CIW and everything, and definitely glad to be a small part of that. As far as the sponsoring the tag match last month, I believe it was.
Yeah, and then this coming month, you're on this one.
Yep. This month too as well. I'm excited about that. It's a big thing for us, and I want to be a part of more, hopefully down the road. And so yeah, that's I definitely wish all those goals to come true for you. Any upcoming shows you would like to promote?
Yeah. So I've taken it a little bit slow recently. So I have 2 shows to finish off the year. I have Martinez Entertainment in Dallas, Texas on December 7th, and CIW's Christmas Chaos on December 8th in Toledo, Ohio. So those are the only 2 bookings I have for the rest of the year, which I'm thankful for because, like I said, my body is not feeling well. I got more time with my son now. And not only that, I have a 2-month-old daughter at home. So taking it easy through the holidays is something I haven't done in many years. So I'm planning on taking it easy for this year and then picking back up with more bookings next year.
There you go. And fans, if you're in these areas of these shows, definitely get out and support indie wrestling and support Michael Elgin. And how can fans find you on social media?
I think my Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, is Aaron Frobel 86. And then I have a Michael Elgin Psychology page on Facebook. And really, outside of that, I just kind of go on social media here and there because I think it's a cesspool.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. I think depending on how you use it, but yeah, I agree.
Yeah, listen, I use it for fun.
Right.
You know, you can't even, I don't know. To me, posting online is never so serious, but everybody wants to act as if it's so serious. Like,
yeah,
nobody actually, to me at least, I've never posted something on Twitter that thought was the end of the world, that like this has to be said, people need to see this, it's for real. It's like you can't even say a joke and then people are like, why would you say that? Well, it's like, what do you like, look at the fucking context of it. If you think that's serious in any realm of this, you're crazy. It's like nothing is so serious. If I really had a problem with somebody, I'm the type of person that's gonna go up to them and tell them. Like, I just think social media is often used by people who don't know how to act with others, so they have to have a persona online so that they can be liked. Yeah. And I think that's silly, you know? I mean, I'd rather have the person beside me know who I am than somebody in fucking North Dakota.
Right.
Right. But again, that's just me. Maybe it's the older I get, the more I see the negative effects of social media. Like, God forbid, man, this past weekend, a 7th grader at my son's school took her own life because of bullying. And, and then they say because, you can't get away from it. Social media. It's like, you can't see the negative effects. Why can't we all just post on social media about the things we love?
Exactly.
Wouldn't that be such a better place? It's like, I want to pick up my phone and see puppies and people talk about the love of wrestling, not somebody yelling about somebody else doing something that you can't even figure out if they actually did it or not. It just doesn't make sense. I don't know. It's all, the world is crazy.
It is. And fans, I hope you go and follow Michael Elgin on all his social media. And then how can promoters or bookers find you and contact you for their next show?
Yeah, Aaron Frobel at gmail.com. No numbers, no other extra letters, just my real name at gmail.com. You can hit up Elgin Bookings at gmail.com. I just don't check that email as often as I once did. Because everybody kind of just hits me up on my Facebook, which is under my real name. So if you know my real name, then you can go there. And I just gave my real name and my email. I probably won't accept too many friend requests, but if you shoot me a message there, I'll end up reading it at some point, especially if it's about bookings.
All right. And then even if you're a promoter out there, and you want to get in contact with them through me or something, I'll hook you up with them or send them.
Yeah, I'd appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that big time.
Send them to you. And so promoters, go book Michael Elgin for your next show. You definitely won't regret it. And then Michael, I definitely want to thank you for coming on this week's Final Count Spotlight, and you're welcome to come back anytime, sir.
Hey, I appreciate you having me, and definitely we'll keep in touch, and we'll have to do another one next year.
Definitely. Appreciate it, man.
All right. Absolutely, my friend.